what is going on, the Catch fam? It is Steven here, and in today's video, we are going to be breaking down the top 5 quarterbacks in the 2022 NFL Draft. Up first, we got Malik Willis from Liberty, man. 6'1", 220, by far the most athletic quarterback in the class, and I think that's why we've got teams rising on him day by day. From the very beginning of this draft, people talked down about all the quarterbacks here and said nobody's going to be a top 10 pick. Now Malik Willis, after what he did at the Senior Bowl, what he did over the offseason, and how all these analysts have now been able to watch his tape, he is now a potential number 2 pick for the Detroit Lions. And I don't mind that pick because you give this guy a year or two to develop. He has got Jalen Hurts type of comparisons for sure all over the place, but he's got a higher ceiling by far too. This guy's arm is amazing. He just needs to get in the right place, and he needs to be able to grow. It's going to take him more than a year, but man, if he can really get into it and really develop with a nice coaching staff, this guy's a quarterback that's going to be around for a while and win some ball games, and he's going to put up a ton of highlights. Number 2, Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh. I think this was the guy coming through the regular season in college football. I really liked him a lot. I loved his tape. He obviously had a tremendous season, 42 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, had the fake quarterback slide that obviously got him a ton of hype. I mean, this was like every fanboy's favorite quarterback. The long flow, did the stylish things, kind of talked with the swagger, right? 6'3", 220, he kind of had the presence as well to be that pocket passer, but he can do a little bit with his feet as well, right? And then everybody starts talking about his hands, and his stock just tanked, man. And I don't think that's totally fair. I think Kenny Pickett is probably the most accurate quarterback in this class. I think he's a pretty pro-ready quarterback too. He can come in there and play. And if he gets paired up in a nice offense, I know right now we're talking about maybe the New Orleans Saints or the Pittsburgh Steelers being a likely spot for him, especially with the Saints drafting up for 2 draft picks there in the first round. I think he can really have a great career in the NFL. I'm not saying this guy's a first sure thing, but the hands are not everything. The guy's hands, though, 8.5 inches. You do have to watch out for that. There's not been many quarterbacks with those small hands in NFL history, so that is a stat that you need to pay attention to. Putting his smaller hand size to the side and maybe not totally overreading into some of his slower processing that he had throughout the season, I do think Kenny Pickett is a guy who should be looked at as a first-round quarterback. Sam Howell, 2 years ago, this guy was probably the best quarterback in the class, right? But last year, with a lot of his teammates leaving North Carolina, obviously Javonte Williams out of there, Michael Carter out of there, Danami Brown, the receiver that went over to the Washington football team, he lost some really good players around him. The offensive line took a step back, and those are a lot of excuses, right? You've got to be able to elevate your team, right? But he's had around 25 touchdowns and 9 interceptions on the season this year in North Carolina. Really shit the bed, man. But 6'1", 220, this guy ran a lot bigger than that, though. His comparisons all over the place to Baker Mayfield, but when this guy ran, he's very athletic. His athleticism actually somewhat comparable to Malik Willis, which is, not a popular thing to say, but when he hits a linebacker or hits a corner, they bounce off of him too. I think Sam Howell might be a quarterback who's taken in the top 10. I know we've heard some rumors about maybe Seattle jumping up and grabbing this guy, who's a little bit of an undersized quarterback, not huge, but he's got a really good deep arm too. And I think Sam Howell has a high ceiling here, but I think there's a lot of concern that last year, the fact that he was not able to elevate that team, maybe he isn't really worth that pick. Desmond Ritter, number 4. I've risen on this guy a ton over the offseason, and not even from his athleticism, not from what he can do with the ball, not from his accuracy, not from his deep arm ability, just for his wits, man, from what he can do in the huddle, from what he does with the team. Everybody who talks about this guy just says that he's got that it factor, and that means a lot. That means a lot. Apparently in the Senior Bowl, he was the guy who stepped up and said, everybody rally around me, took him down the field, got the game-winning drive. Desmond Ritter is just that dude, and I think a lot of teams in the NFL are going to want to huddle around that guy. And I know Pittsburgh's getting high on him. A lot of teams are really starting to rise on this guy as a first-round draft pick because this guy had a lot of success at Cincinnati. I mean, he had one bad game against Alabama, and you can't totally kill this dude for that. But at 6'3", 211, had 4 years of production at Cincinnati, and he was a dude here who had a 91-yard rushing touchdown against SMU back in 2020. This guy has got some serious athleticism, and I would definitely take a shot on a guy like Desmond Ritter, who has probably the best mental makeup out of all the quarterbacks in this draft class. Number 5, Matt Corral. This is by far my least favorite prospect, but I do think he deserves to be in the top 5 because of his arm. This guy is the best RPO quarterback in this draft class, in my opinion. And maybe a year away ago, I mean, that Matt Corral was an even more attractive option, right? The reason I don't love him anymore is because he had the injuries over the regular season, but I think he kind of nursed him, right? He didn't show what he had in the offseason. He didn't do anything at the Senior Bowl. He's just been standing in the shadows. And I think he did that. Maybe his agent told him to do that because don't hurt your draft stock, right? But in my opinion, that hurt his draft stock, kind of like a Derek Stingley Jr. Derek Stingley didn't really opt in to do any drills or anything. And a lot of people were just like, bro, you're not really trying to show how good you are. And Matt Corral, 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. I mean, he's an elite, he's a good quarterback, and he's probably got one of the best arms in the sense that he makes some certain throws where it's just like, wow, right? And not all the quarterbacks in this draft class has that. Matt Corral does have that. He's got really good RPO. He's got some good chops to him too. Played at a big time school in Ole Miss, but I just don't feel as high about him as I feel about the other 4 guys. Although this dude still might be a first-round draft pick because he does have that type of skill set. And with that said, guys, that has been the top 5 quarterbacks in the 2022 NFL draft. And before we end, maybe we got to talk about fantasy football. Malik Willis is by far the best quarterback for fantasy football in this draft. Probably the only quarterback that I'd be willing to take a shot on in fantasy football this year. If you're going to take a shot on a quarterback, take a shot on Malik Willis. Very end of your draft. This guy is going to be a dude who probably sees the field this year. And when he does, he's got the opportunity to do similar to what a Jalen Hurts did, where his rushing upside and a rushing floor on a weekly basis is going to give him that chance to make you have a competitive quarterback on a weekly basis. With that said, that has been the top 5 quarterbacks in the 2022 NFL draft. You saw it here first at The Catch.